Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to the April Elevate HR event. Today we have Lindsey Fouquette and her team from Central HR. They're going to talk to us about job descriptions and how to do those well. So I will turn it over to Lindsey.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're all doing well and ready for some great job description information. So I'm going to share my screen. Let me get the presentation going. Okay. Can you all see the screen? Okay, wonderful. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about understanding the job evaluation process, and then we're also going to discuss writing effective job descriptions. And just as Deanna mentioned, my name is Lindsey Fouquette. I'm the Director of Talent Acquisition within Central HR, and I have 3 other people from my team that I would like for them to introduce themselves. LB, do you want to start?
Sure. I'm LB Potter. I am a Principal Talent Acquisition Consultant assigned to the Job Evaluation Team under Central HR.
And Casey?
Hi, I'm Casey Kashra. I'm a Senior Talent Acquisition Consultant under the Job Evaluation side as well.
And last but not least, Geraldine.
Hi, everyone. I'm Geraldine. I'm also a Talent Acquisition Consultant, and I am on the Job Evaluation side.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we'll go ahead and get started. So for this course today, by the end of this course, we're hoping that you have a better understanding of what we're doing within the job evaluation process, specifically how we classify positions by the job families, sub-functions, and unique compensation codes, as we all call UCCs. And so to understand the purpose and structure within a job description, and then also some best practices as far as writing effective job descriptions. And we have some insights from a recruitment perspective on how the job description pieces fits into the job posting and recruitment phase. And so for as far as course etiquette, just want to make sure everyone's paying attention. We've got a lot of good content, but I will say, feel free to ask questions. We're going to be monitoring the chat as you have questions, and then we'll respond to questions within the chat and then cover those within the question sections. We have some natural question sections built in there. And then we do have a couple of group activities, different things for you all to participate in. But yes, if you have questions, please pop those into the chat and we'll go from there. So first, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to LB.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Hopefully everyone had a nice lunch. It's kind of sunny, so I hope everyone's having a good day. To kick us off, we're going to look into understanding the job evaluation process in a lot more detail, specifically what makes up a classification, like what is the end goal of an evaluation that we're trying to do for you as part of a centralized body. Next slide. To get us started, we have a fun activity for you. Perfect. What we are hoping to do is actually get a word cloud going, and by kicking off to the group with a question. So if you'd like to reply to our question, we have a link available on the slide here, and we can also, can someone just pop that into the chat so everyone can kind of quickly link it if they don't want to use their phone. Another option is you can sign into this word cloud activity by texting Lindsey F050 and then texting that number so you can join our session. The question we are throwing out there today is, what word or words come to mind when you think of a job description? And we should be able to see responses. Nice, qualifications. That is definitely a huge way that we communicate needs for our positions, both desired and required. I know there's lots of great HR brainpower in here, so we're going to get some good examples, I know. Skills, definitely a great way to communicate skills, and in a place where we don't get to communicate it a lot to other people. Nice. Job duties, perfect. Oh, I like how it's switching things around. So the posting range is definitely a reason that we use the job description. It helps us determine how much we can compensate a position. Expertise. Long. Okay, yes. I like these. examples, salary expectations, career, descriptive. These are all great. All right. Well, it seems like responses are slowing down. So thank you so much for participating. Lindsay, do you want to just take us back to the slide deck? I really appreciate everyone's responses. And it really sounds like everyone has a really strong understanding of what a job description is, even some of the pain points that we face with job descriptions. So I appreciate that as well. When we sort of talk about a job description, one of the key definitions that we typically bring up, especially with working with someone for the first time, is a definition that was provided actually by the Society for Human Resources Management, so SHRM. And what I like about this one is it mentions the term plain language tool. So they define a job description as a useful and plain language tool that explains the task, duties, functions, and responsibilities of a position. So things that all of you touched on in the word cloud as well. I personally, when I think of a job description, I also think through the lens of need. So I feel like your job descriptions really express your department need to us. And then we can help determine a classification that aligns with that need based on the duties and responsibilities that are being performed. In terms of the purpose of a job description, there's really kind of 4 things that come to mind for me as a talent acquisition job evaluator. Selfishly, the first one is directly about my job. So the more detailed and descriptive and accurate job descriptions are, I feel like the better the work you'll get from our team will be, the better the evaluation will be, the more accurate the classification will be, and hopefully that will get you to whatever your end goal is. The promotion at the level you want it at, a recruitment at the level you need it at to fulfill that business need. Another thing that I really think of when I think about the purpose of a job description is that really well detailed or engaging job descriptions lead to better job advertisements, because there's just a lot of great information for us to pull from that really allows us to create more content or more interesting content for candidates so that they know what work is being performed, and then they can tell whether or not they're qualified for the position, which is really helpful. I think another reason we really love like a well-detailed job description or the purpose of a job description is from a performance standpoint. When you have a detailed job description, I do think that employees understand what's expected of their role, and supervisors know what should be determined or used as a marker for performance. So there's just a better baseline of understanding. And then sort of like the last thing that I think of, because it's an HR presentation, I can't not talk about equal pay for equal work, but I do think job descriptions also really help through that compliancy lens, as we're really able to do a lot more accurate equity, compression, and compensation studies if we have job descriptions that are accurate and then placed in the appropriate classification. So any questions about this piece at all before I hand you off to Lindsay for the next few slides? Anything in the chat, Lindsay? Fantastic.
No.
I explained that very well then. So I'm going to pass it off to you.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat, and I will be sending out a participant guide to all of you here shortly that has the slides on here as soon as I get to our first break. So it's coming. All right, so as far as the next pieces of it, we're going to dive into the classification structure. And so you'll hear some of the terminology that we've been throwing around as far as like classifying a job. And we want to give everyone a better understanding about, from a foundational standpoint, what we're talking about. And so when we're classifying jobs, it's within a structure, and this pyramid that's over here on the left side represents that really well, whereas we're starting out with a job family, which is the broad definition. And then we're going to go in a little bit further for the subfunction, and then we're going to go into the level. And so from a classification standpoint, we want to make sure that we're aligning jobs that fit together, that they have similar knowledge, skills, and abilities, and they represent a career path from the lowest to highest. And so how that actually helps us is from a market pay standpoint, is that we're able to really analyze those positions that should be together because they're doing similar functions, for us to get better pay salary ranges when it comes to market pay. It also organizes the jobs for improved competitiveness in the labor market. And I know all of you know this is a competitive market right now when it comes to labor and our qualified individuals getting positions. And so the more that we're able to do that, the better it's going to be. and it helps ensure the equity amongst the pay for similar roles, as well as having consistent expectations within a role. And so when we break it down, we talk about from a classification perspective. First, we were talking about job families. That's the bottom part of the pyramid. So a job family is defined as a group of jobs that involve similar work and require similar training, skills, knowledge, and expertise. So just for context, within our CU system, we have 20 job families that we use within our classification structure. So when I say CU system, all of CU system uses it. So Boulder campus, our Colorado Springs, our system uses it. We do have some variations when it comes to the sub-function, but from a job family standpoint, we have 20. But for our campus, we really use about 15 of those job families. Some of the other job families that we really don't use is there's one in there for athletics. You will know that we do not have an athletics program on the Anschutz Medical Campus. And so that's one that we really don't use, but other campuses use because they have use for an athletics. When it comes to sub-function is a smaller group of jobs within a larger job family, and sub-functions describe the more specialized functions. And so as you're thinking about the more broader job family, it's going to be that broader definition, and then your sub-function definition is going to get more into the specialization to try to group those jobs together a little bit more. And right now we have 113 sub-functions, and I say and growing because that's one where if we actually see a need within the classification structure that shows that we should be getting a new position, we should get a new sub-function in there, that's something that our friends over in the compensation department, they can actually help put those things together. And so if that's a gap that we're seeing within our classification structure, our compensation team is who helps put those together if we're looking for new sub-functions. And then from a level perspective, I actually have this graphic here on the right side where it's got the different types of job levels that we have. I know a lot of you are very familiar with entry through principal professional, and then we have program manager, director. But for the level, it indicates the general experience required to fill a position at a certain level. And so the level is going to be indicated by the job code. And so you'll see job code used quite a bit from a classification standpoint. The job code is what we use within HCM, and that's tailored to go to the level. It coordinates with the level of the position. It's the 4-digit number. And we'll get a little bit more into that as we progress through the presentation. But with university staff, this is going to be the titles, the job code. We actually have the university's professional staff. We have the job code resources. And then this is also determined by the type, independence, and the scope of duties performed when it comes to level. So those are the different things that we're looking at from a classification perspective. And some of the things that I just want to indicate from an example standpoint is typically with our entry-level positions, we're just looking for a bachelor's degree. And then for positions that are higher than that, we're looking for typically a bachelor's degree plus some level of experience. But we try to keep that more unified across the university so that we're able to compare positions that are doing similar work. Okay, before I turn that over, are there any questions in the chat?
No questions in the chat yet, Lindsay.
Okay, all right, I'm turning it back over to Elby.
All right. So when we talk through the classification process or the great slides that Lindsay just went over, really that end goal for us as part of the job evaluation process is that classification. For most of the positions that we are going to be evaluating, especially for this audience in campus, they're going to have 3 total components of a classification. And you can see them amplified in the pie that we have on the screen. Before we transition out of this slide, I will also touch on what positions don't have all 3, because not every position on our campus will have a unique compensation code, which is something we're diving into a lot more deeper in this particular training, just so you know what positions have it, where to find it, what it is, etc. So when I talk about the end goal for our position, we really start with trying to first determine a family for your position. So a really broad umbrella that we can group generally similar positions together on our campus. When we think about that from the professional lens, that could be examples such as like research services and healthcare, which I know we have a lot in this group, or HR, which I would think there's a lot of people in that group here today. If we're talking paraprofessional, that could be the administrative assistant series, that could be dental care, that could be really anything that falls into that clerical, technical, or administrative series of positions. When we're happy collectively with the level of or for the family of the position, we then move on to the level of your position. And I really think about that like a ladder system and thinking about the organizational structure that we have on campus and where or what rung this position might be standing on the ladder. So if you think about that from the professional lens, your position could be sitting at the senior professional level, maybe a manager, maybe a director. And then the same idea in the paraprofessional series. If you, for example, have an administrative assistant, are they sitting at a level 1, 2, or 3? And we determine that based on the duties and the scope of responsibilities that they're performing. Again, then collectively, once we're happy with the family and level, we then look at a unique compensation code. And that really might be a newer classification piece that some of you are not totally familiar with yet, because it really only started to come into practice around equal pay for equal work. And the idea behind assigning a unique compensation code to your position is to sort of build off of what we did with family, where we broadly grouped positions together, and now take that bigger group and say, let's more specifically group things together based on either significantly similar work or identical work. So like an example might be, in particular, when you're working with the university staff series, looking at things like the family might be research services, the level might be a senior professional, and the unique compensation code might be laboratory research because the work that's being done is laboratory related versus something else that might fall into the same family and level of the position. So before stopping for questions, I also wanted to just note really quick that the goal here, this end goal of finding all of these different pieces to the puzzle, is really a collaborative process. So we really want to partner closely with all of you who know your department, your positions, your roles a lot better than we do, and we know the structure. And so together, we really are working to find a family level, and if the position requires it, a unique compensation code that really speaks to the need of your department, the type of work that's being performed, and then also just aligns with some of the compliance pieces that we're helping to oversee as part of the evaluation process. What questions do we have about this before I sort of move on to what doesn't have a unique compensation code and why?
Not seeing any questions in the chat so far.
Perfect. So when we think about the end goal that's pictured here, we really are talking about university staff positions that are professional, so entry through director level, and then our executive assistant series. All of those together are going to have 3 pieces of the pie. But when we're talking about positions like within our paraprofessional series, that particular group does not actually have a unique compensation code. And the reason behind that is our paraprofessional series is identical to the state's position. So for example, an admin assistant on our campus is the same class descriptions, we use the same levels, and we ultimately use the same compensation structures that are used by the state. And so there really wasn't a need for us to create a unique compensation code because we use the state's ranges in order to create institutional and statewide parity. So that one kind of makes sense. We use theirs, so we don't have our own. On the reverse side of that, our executive positions also don't have a unique compensation code. So that might be things at like the dean levels, that might be the associate vice chancellors or vice chancellor roles that you have. And you'll notice even when you go to like our compensation matrix, there aren't pay bands set out for those positions at all. And we do that because the market is just so incredibly fluid for positions at this level that we've never really been able to make static pay bands. And so instead of having unique compensation codes, we instead do a market match each time a position comes up for vacancy or promotion. So again, just because we don't have any standard bands, there was no purpose to create a unique compensation code. All right. So any questions about that piece before I move on, Lindsey, you're seeing?
Not seeing anything.
Perfect. So once we collaboratively, and I'm going to keep reinforcing that, it's a very collaborative process. Once we collaboratively confirm a classification, that really drives a lot of additional decisions for us. It tells us whether or not your position is going to fit into the university staff or classified employment group. It lets us know what compensation range is appropriate for your position, like what can be posted, what's going to be used for your potential hire, what qualifications make sense for your position, and then also, what is the FLSA status of your position? Is it going to be overtime eligible or not? And because we get so many questions about employment group, we are going to touch on that a lot more detail further in the conversation, but we did want to make sure that we kind of covered unique comp code in much more detail before moving on. And I think there might be a question in the chat. Did something come up, Lindsay?
It looks like we just have a comment from Lori about UCCs. It says in some cases with community practice, for example, we need UCCs for like a patient service rep in a clinic that maps out to an admin too. So we can certainly take a look at doing some things like that for future projects.
Yeah, that's such a great note. If you have like ideas behind that, even to Lindsay's point, let's say that we are working to determine a unique comp code for your position, and we're looking at all the options, and you say like, gosh, just nothing is quite touching on this extremely unique position that I have. Please continue to bring that to our attention. This was really rolled out around the start of Equal Pay for Equal Work, but our campus has grown so much. If there's just something that's not quite covering the type of work that's being performed, let us know. We can look into that for future additions to the list. All right. Well, if there are no questions, we can move to the next slide, which I just want to give a shout out to Lindsay, has a really great visual for a unique compensation code. I think it breaks it down in such an easy to understand visual. I know when these first rolled out, I would get these codes sent to me and I was like, I don't know what this is. I think I understand classification, but I don't know what this is. So we wanted to give you an idea of like, if you happen to be receiving a report and it has this code on it, what does the report actually indicate? So as you can see in the visual, we really break a unique compensation code down into 3 unique sections or 8 total characters. The first 2 letters indicate your job family, so that broad umbrella that we've grouped your position under. In this case, we evaluated your position and it looks like we put it in the research services family. We then look to the next 2 letters, which are indicative of your subfunction. And I do feel like subfunction and unique comp code often get discussed interchangeably. So really, when we think about unique comp code, it's this whole string of letters, and your subfunction is kind of that unique group that we're assigning your position to once we determine your broad umbrella ladder. So in this case, we looked at the position and it looks like it's doing clinical research work under research services. So we've assigned it a code of CR. The last 4 numbers in this code are going to indicate your job code. So the level that we've placed your position at once we've determined your family. And this all together then, if you read it through as a group, would be a research services clinical research manager. So fairly easy to sort of navigate once you know actually what all the parts stand for. And as part of the training, Lindsay is definitely going to go over what additional resources are available for unique comp codes and subfunctions, how to find them in HCM, and be walking us through that as the training goes on. And then if you want to go to the next slide, Lindsay, I think this visual too is just so helpful from the standpoint of like a quick reference cheat sheet. And in particular, we get a lot of questions about the professional and the paraprofessional series. I think a lot of people don't have as many questions about the executive series because that process of getting unique ranges each time has been common practice a little bit longer. But if you are working with either a professional position, you are going to be noticing that at the end of your classification, you're going to get all 3 pieces of that pie. So a unique comp code will be assigned to your position. And again, that's going to be the university staff professional position, so entry through director level. And then we also roll executive assistants into that as well because they are performing a professional executive level work. If you're dealing with a paraprofessional position, as you can see indicated by the lower 2 options, your position would not have a unique comp code assigned, again, because we would be using the state's classification and comp structure in order to mirror our positions, whether the position was university staff or state classified. So just a great cheat sheet visual. Any questions about that before we take a quick break? All right. Well, we have a break built in for you. It looks like they're stretching, so you're welcome to do that. Get a quick drink. We'll be back in just a few minutes then. Did we say 5, Lindsay, for this section?
We've got 5. Yeah, we've got 5 minutes.
All right. Well, we'll see you then.
32.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay, well, welcome back from the break. We are trying to sprinkle some breaks in here, so we realize that you probably have some things that you want to get to here and there, but we've got some great information, so just hoping you all are able to be present while we're going through this. But we're going to get into the next sections of this, and we do have another break sprinkled in. So the next part we're going to get into are how are university staff jobs classified? And so that's a question that we get a lot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to our Central HR website so that we can navigate to our FY 2023 University Staff Job Family document and just be able to show everyone what that document looks like and how we use it. And so just so you know, the guide that I just sent out, the participant guide, in Appendix 2, there's actually step-by-step directions on how to navigate to this section in here for you to be able to look at with the document that we're going to be going to. And so if you go to our Central HR pages, and actually, let me take a step back. We have recently gone through a website update. I'm sure many of you have noticed we are still going through some of those different shifts and changes. But this is our new Anschutz campus. We had recently split the Denver and the Anschutz campus. And so this is the new just Anschutz version of it. So if you go to the HR Business Partners piece, and then if you go scroll down to the resources for all employee categories, you actually can click on these different areas in here for the different employment types. And for our purposes, we're going to be looking at university staff. And then we'll scroll down here. And then if we go to the compensation tab and click the plus sign, we can go down here to the FY 2023 University Staff Job Family Subfunction Level Definitions and Salary Range document. So I'm going to click on that. It is a password protected document. And so if you do need the password, you can always ask your talent acquisition consultant and they can surely share that with you as far as like if you need help with that. But I'm going to go ahead and pull that up. And it's not sharing, so stand by. There it is. Okay, I'll pull that screen over. Okay. So another quick note just to mention is that this document is updated annually by our compensation team. Our compensation team actually oversees this document. So the families, the subfunctions, the salary ranges. And just a quick tip, we actually are going to have updates to this document. So the FY 2024 document is going to be coming out in early June. And so in early June, we'll be making sure to share that with all of you about what those are, because we'll have our new salary ranges for the different classifications. And so for our purposes, when we're taking a look at this document, we have it set up to where it's got your job families, it's got your subfunctions, professional titles, the UCC, the salary ranges. And I will share the document that we have on the website is not necessarily organized this way, but the new way that we're going to have it organized is like how we've been going through, where it goes job, family, subfunction. And so it flows a little bit more with how we classify the different jobs. And so I'm just giving you a heads up. I had rearranged these, but this is actually how it's going to flow with the new FY 2024 version. And so when we take a look at this document from a classification piece, these are our job families that we have on here. That are within the CU system. And then each of them have definitions. And keep in mind, back to what I was talking about earlier, that these are going to be broad definitions. So these are going to be very broad in nature to be able to capture a lot of the different jobs that are doing similar work. But then the subfunctions is really going to start to drill down on the specialization. And so when we have a new position come in with an MPP that needs to be classified, then or if it's a promotion, the first thing that we're taking a look at is what is the classification. So we start the job family. So we're taking a look at that nature of work and the duty statement to really take a look at what makes sense from a definition perspective to try to classify the position. So once we start there at the broad piece of the job family, then we go into the subfunctions. And so the subfunctions, you'll notice in here from a classification perspective, it's got your job family, and then it's got your subfunction, and then you've got your subfunction definitions that are over here to the right. All of these are broken out by the job family. So for instance, we were looking at academic services earlier. And so these are all of the different subfunctions within academic services, same with business services, and so on and so forth with how the document is set up. But you'll notice in here that when we look at the job family back to the illustration that LB had shown earlier, where academic services, that's abbreviated for AS. So that's the first two characters in your unique compensation code. And then if we were classifying this job as academic advising, that's AA, that's going to be your sub-function. And so we would then have AS, AA as the four characters of the unique compensation code. But what we do at this piece is then we're taking a look from a classification perspective. We're reading the different definitions. Once we've settled on a job family, we're looking at the different definitions within the sub-function to see, based off of the nature of work and the duties, what makes the most sense from a sub-function perspective for this work to be classified. And so there's a lot of different definitions in there. We're just at this time looking at the academic services, and we've got a lot of other definitions in here, but we're really just looking at those to just figure out what makes the most sense as far as a fit for the classification. And then once we've determined the class, that piece, the job family and the sub-function, then we take a look at the level. And so that's when we start getting into the scope of work, the responsibilities, what kind of autonomy that position would have, and how that's set up. And so then we take a look at, down here we have entry, intermediate professional, senior, principal, professional. But over here, we have in these different sections, this is going to be what we'd be looking for as far as being able to see that level of if there's any different like critical thinking, if they're supervising staff, different things like that that would characterize the position from a level perspective. That way we're able to better classify the position. And then you can see over here, we also have some definitions when it comes to the minimum qualifications for the role. So we have some expectations about what that looks like. And that goes back to trying to make it uniform across the board when we're classifying positions. So we're trying to compare like positions, and we're expecting similar levels of experience when they're coming into that role. And then the next one we have on here is our UCC key. This is a lot to go through. I don't know that as many people go to this section. I think maybe mostly our team might go to it, but this actually shows all the different combinations as far as like if we're in research services, which I know a lot of you have research services positions in here. You can see it's research services, you can see the different sub-function, and you can see the unique compensation code, and then you can have like the titling of the position title. And then if you go over this one, this is where we get into the salary. And so going back to that unique compensation code, that's so important, especially when we're looking at the salary piece, because it correlates to the salary. So for instance, if we were looking at, let's see here, we're in research services. You can see over here where you have the RS, and then you have the AM, which indicates your sub-function, which I believe is animal management. I think that's animal management. Don't quote me on that. I know it's on here. And I know the next one is community engagement. But these are the different sub-functions within the overall. And then you can see over here how it correlates to the job code, and then it correlates to the title. And then we have the salary that goes next to it. And then we have ones that have specific salary ranges. So for instance, clinical sciences, if I go back to clinical sciences, clinical research, those are in green. And if they're in green on this section of it, and also in the sub-function, that means it has its own individual salary range based off of the sub-function that's in there, because the work is specialized in nature and has a different market pay structure than what some of the other positions are. But if they don't, if they're in white, that means they're in the overall piece of any of ours. And so from a salary perspective, if we go back to the overall, you can see the different unique compensation codes that correlate, that are in the overall. And then over here are the ones that are going to be specialized based off the work that is being done. I'm going to pause there. What questions do you have about this?
So nothing currently in the chat, Lindsay, but I will keep an eye out.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot in here, and there's a lot to digest. And so just know you have a lot of great resources in your TAC consultant. So if questions come up even after this presentation, we're happy to answer those. The other thing that I will mention is, since we're in the salary section, we have our salary ranges by the minimum of the salary range up to the 40th, because we usually post the minimum up to the 40th. And if you're wanting to post above the 40th, that's when we get our friends from the compensation team. where they can approve like a higher piece if that's required. And then we also have the mid of the range and then the maximum of the range. And so that's indicated for all of those. And then we do have some other resources in here. So the alternate funded ones that LB had mentioned, these are actually the job codes section here, but we have alternate funded ranges. So if you have paraprofessional positions in there, we have those ranges in here. And so those are all going to be updated with the new version coming in the beginning, around the beginning of June. And then we also have the different definitions when it comes to our paraprofessional series. And that comes into play when we get our job descriptions for your paraprofessional positions, which can also be some of your alternate funded positions that don't meet the professional exemption. And we'll get into some of that stuff a little bit more. Okay, so back to the presentation. So that is the document that we use to classify positions across the university. And it looks like we do have a question. I wanted to obtain the website, but the one does not show left tab salary ranges. I'm looking for a bunch of titles. So the document that's in there right now is the version that we have for FY 2023. The FY 2024 will have some of the new ones that I'm showing you. I just wanted to be able to demonstrate what it's going to look like. It's got the same information, it's just organized a little bit differently. So if any other questions come up about that, just let me know. But thanks for that note, Sabrina. So just from a classification perspective, your talent acquisition consultant will review the job description that's submitted through. They'll specifically get the UCC that's recommended by the hiring department if they know what they think that the position is classified at. And so then we're taking a look again at that nature of work and duties to determine what job family, the level and the sub-function best fits the role. And then once that's determined, the TAC consultant will review the minimum qualifications to ensure that aligns with what we're asking for from a university perspective, and then go back to make sure that the preferred qualifications are aligning with what should be asked for within that position as well. So the next question that we've been getting is, where do I find a UCC? And just so you know, from a participation guide, and it's in Appendix 1 at the end of the participant guide, there's actually step-by-step on the part that I'm about to show you. But I'm just going to go out and do a quick demo of how to find UCC in position. So I'm going to pull up our good friend HCM. So in HCM, I'm going to go out, let's see here, minimize this one. So if you are in HCM, if you're wanting to find out what your UCC is, you want to go into position management, specifically position information. Position information is where you're going to be able to find the unique compensation code. I have a position number, so you do need the position number to be able to look this up. I do have a position number that we're just going to take a look at. And I believe it's one, probably out of, yeah, community practice. Okay, so this is the position data that we have in here. And so this is actually a lot of great information about the role itself, as far as FTE, the amount of, if it's part-time, full-time, number of hours worked. From a classification perspective, it shows the job code and different things. So there's a lot of great information on that front page. Now, if you go along up here along these top tabs, this is where you can actually find your unique compensation code. So you want to go to CU position compensation. And so when you do that, that's when you're going to see compensation code. So your unique compensation code should be in there. So if you go back to that great graphic that LB had shown us earlier, if it is a university staff position, we should have something indicated in here as far as a UCC. If for whatever reason you're not seeing a UCC in here, that's when you want to talk to your TAC consultants, because they can help you out with making sure that the correct UCC is in there. I will also add just a new thing that we have been doing is that once a week we are running reports on if we're missing UCCs. And so for the most part, we're typically catching those very quickly now. And so if it's missing a unique compensation code, or maybe it's a mismatch to where the job code is not matching the level it's supposed to be at, we're actually running reports on that as well and trying to catch those. And so we might actually be reaching out to you to say, hey, we noticed that this position is at this level, but we're seeing it this. Can you let us know like what level it's supposed to be at? So if we're reaching out for that, that's what we're just trying to make sure from a data perspective that we're trying to keep things as clean as possible and trying to make sure, because a lot of this stuff from the unique compensation code goes into your compression, below minimum, and things like that. And so that's why it's important for us to make sure that the unique compensation codes are matching up with what we're looking for. Any questions about finding a UCC?
I am not seeing anything in the general chat just yet, Lindsay.
Okay, wonderful. So back to the presentation. I do have the step-by-step instructions in there, so don't worry. If I'm not here to explain it to you step-by-step, you have your own step-by-step resources on it, and your tax consultant can also help answer any questions you might have on that. For the most part, Central HR has the responsibility of populating the unique compensation code. HR business partners, any of you on this call have the ability to see what the unique compensation code is. We actually have the ability to edit those unique compensation codes. And so if you ever have any questions about it, like for instance, if it's missing one or if it's not matching up, just let your tax consultant know on the job evaluation side, and they can certainly help you with that. Now, next question we normally have is like, what's the HR business partner's role with the unique compensation code? And especially since, I mean, it is relatively new with some of the things that we've been doing. We haven't been doing this for, I mean, we've been doing this for a couple of years now, but most of the time we get questions asked about what the role is. And so really the HR business partner's role is to partner with the department to have a complete job description. And so a complete job description is going to be really important because we're taking a look at that nature, the nature of duty, the nature of work, and the duty statement to really understand the role and classify it. One thing that I always like to point out is that oftentimes the HR business partner, many of you that are on the call, are going to be a lot closer to the position than what we are in Central HR. And so you'll sometimes have a better handle on what the role is doing. Is it supervising? The type of duties it has? It makes sense. We are a little bit more detached, and so what we can evaluate is off of what's sent to us. And so sometimes we'll have questions that come up, and we'll come back and ask some different questions just to make sure from a clarification standpoint that we're in the right direction when it comes to classifying the role. The HR business partner, what we're looking for is to make a recommendation when it comes to the unique compensation code. And so it's not necessarily that it's going to be like, it's spot on, this is exactly what it is, but to at least make a recommendation of where you think the role should be sitting at from a classification piece. That helps us understand that when we're going through and reviewing the position, if it's aligning with what we're seeing and everything looks good, then that's great. Now, if we're completely off base and we're just like, man, this job family does not seem to fit like what they're saying it is, most of the time, that means that we probably need some more information, and we'll set up a time to talk with you a little bit more to kind of get more information and figure out what's going on and why we might be very far off from like what you think the position is. And so if it's not clear on what the unique comp code should be, you can still have the NPP submitted and your tax consultant will classify the position. But I would say that if you do submit a unique compensation code in there and it's off base and we're not seeing like what it is you are, we're going to collaborate with you. Back to like what Elby was talking about earlier, we're going to make sure to collaborate with you. We're going to ask some questions and try to figure out, because ultimately we're trying to get it classified within where it should be at and trying to make sure we have the most accurate information. And then we also can assist with, like, for instance, you have a position out there that you're just like, you know, this is what we think it's supposed to be at. We can also do some consulting with you to take a look at it and just make some recommendations on what might make it to the level that you think it's at. And then sometimes it's just one of those where that is the work that's being done and that is the correct classification. But that is a partnership between us and the HR business partner and the hiring managers to make sure that we have the information to get it classified correctly. I would also say that within the unique compensation code, we do have some new templates out in our job description library, and I will actually go out there in just a second to show you because I'm pretty excited about this. But we do have the unique compensation code up in the header, and so I have some great examples down here where for the header you want to have the job family, the working title, the college, school, the department, the position number, and then the UCC. That's just going to help us know right off the bat what you're looking for when you're submitting that in. And then down here, you can see like an example of one. I think I picked this up off the Cancer Center, so shout out to Kim. But we have in here with the title, the position title, we have the working title, we have the school, we have the department, position number, and then we have the UCC. And so that's actually just going to help us from a consistency standpoint, so we know right off the bat what you are looking for when it comes to classifying the position. And so before I go out and show the job description library, are there any questions out there?
So no questions on this particular slide. We did get a great question on the participant guide. And so if you're noticing any discrepancies between the slide and the participant guide, we will definitely double check anything. And if we need to get you another version, we will do that ASAP. So thank you everyone who's providing feedback.
All right. So I'm going to go back out to our website. So we're going to go back to our Central HR website, our CU Anschutz website. So if we go back out to our CU Anschutz website, university staff, and then scrolling down, under this job description resources and job posting template, we have job description and job posting templates. That's where you're going to find our job description template and the job posting template. We have those documents live together. They have very different intentions, but they do live together in this to try to make it a little bit more of an ease for all of you. So it's just one document you're submitting versus multiple documents. And so one thing I will point out, and I actually do have this in Appendix 2 of the participant guide, where it shows step-by-step on different things. But for our purposes, we're going to go ahead and click on the job description template. It's pulling up right now. So for our job description template, up here, you'll notice in the instruction section, it says copy job family level position information from the job description library. We actually do have a link to that also on our front page, because we have the professional and paraprofessional job libraries in there. But the purpose that I wanted to show in here, and I just unclicked off of it, is that if you link to this part and you open this hyperlink, it is going to go ahead and link you to our professional library or university staff professional level. And so I'm going to pull this up because it is a Word document. And the reason I say that is this is actually going to save you some steps. And so let me go back and explain this a little bit more. So the purpose is that to go into this university staff job description place in there, and you want to copy the job family level position information, we actually have done a lot of the legwork when it comes to the professional level job description library, where it's organized by the job family and then it's organized by the level. And so if you go in there, and you can go in there and copy the description information and just paste it into this section. Like that's the whole purpose of that, so that you have all of the different pieces that you need within the job description. And so once you have that, I'm going to pull up the library, and it's got the instructions on here if you haven't used the job description library before. But let's say we're going into academic services, and we just click open hyperlink, and then you just want to go to whatever level of position that you're wanting to use. And so for our purposes, let's look at the program director. So if you go ahead and copy this information over, you just want to paste that into that job description template in there, because it's blank in there, but this is all the information that we're going to need. And so you can see that it's already set up, that it has the position title, working title, school, college, unit. It's got all this great information up here in the header that we would need to classify, to like get us started as far as classifying. And then it's also got the job family definition, it's got the level definition. And then we're looking for the nature of work. So we're looking for 1 to 2 paragraphs that have specific responsibilities for the position, supervision received, supervision exercised. I know that's something that we have not been asking for before, but from a classification standpoint, that really helps us if we can understand who the position is reporting to, and also who are the direct reports if the position is supervising others in the titles. That helps us to where we can look at maybe similar positions to ensure that we're classifying positions with the same UCC if they're doing the same work. And then we have talked about before with duties, trying to put duty statements together that add up to 100% and using percent of duties. That's going to be something else that we're starting to look for. But then we also have bachelor's degree, preferred qualifications, looking for about 3 to 5 that directly relate to the position. And then we have knowledge, skills, and abilities. And we are recommending around 5 to 7 on those. And we'll touch on some of these things a little bit more, but I did want to show that this is what we have as far as this. And I think I'm getting some questions in the chat.
Yes, we are getting some questions. So Kim had a question. Will there be an open rank template?
Ooh, that's a good question. We can certainly look at putting an open rank template together if that would be helpful. I know that they do that on the faculty side. And so if that's helpful for all of you, we could certainly look at putting an open rank template together. One thing that I will mention when it comes to the template, oh, I lost my train of thought on that. It'll come back to me. But yes, we can certainly look at doing an open rank template if that's helpful for you.
Yeah, thank you, Kim. Good question. We have 2 questions that sort of piggyback off of each other from Tanya. So question 1 is for a posting only. Should the top and bottom posting need to be completed on the template?
So I assume that right here is we're probably talking about the job description, and then we're talking about the job posting. Tanya, is that correct? Am I on the right page there?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, excellent. So if you're doing a search, yes, if you're doing a search, you want to have the job description completed, and you want to have all these great things within the functional attributes, which we'll get into some of these things a little bit more. And then you want to have the job posting template down here completed. If you are just doing a promotion where we do not have to post the position because less than 50% of the duties are not changing, you can stop right there if we're not going to be posting the position. We just need a job description to have on file so we know what duties are being done for that role.
Great. And then she had a great follow-up question as well. Can the Why Join Us section be included in the top portion so it's not forgotten down below in the job ad?
So the Why Join Us section is actually supposed to be for just the job posting advertisement. I mean, realistically for that, like that's really written to be attracting candidates for the role. The job description is really, the purpose of that is to really inform employees of what their duties are in the role, whereas the job posting is supposed to be an advertisement to attract people to the role. And so that's why it's a little bit different. What I would encourage you to do, and this is what we've been talking with other departments, is that if you can have like a general statement that you normally have in the Why Join Us section, that's a great way to make sure that it's always in there. But I would recommend putting something together. We're actually seeing some great success with people putting some of those statements together.
Yeah, there are a couple questions I'm getting about how to access the job description library. So in the chat, I'm going to put a direct link to our university staff job description and code main page. But I'm wondering, Lindsey, would you mind like walking them through just how to navigate there in case for some reason we don't live in this meeting forever and they'd like to just have a memory of how to get there?
We can do that. And I do have an appendix too. There is a section there about the job library. So there's step-by-step in there. So I will certainly walk through it, and then just know that you have your steps to follow at a later date. And so if I go back out to the Central HR page, and I want to go to university staff, and just keep in mind, this is for university staff. This is not for faculty. And then we go down here to search and hiring process. We have job description library. And it's this document right here. So it's this Word document that we pull up, and that's how you access the job description library. I will say, since I have all of my friends here from School of Medicine, I did put an exception piece on there for the job library, because if you have a research services, laboratory, clinical, or information sciences, we actually have some phenomenal resources for you on the School of Medicine intranet site. And I'm going to assume that you have all been there, but I'm just going to show you real quick that it is, let's see here. I actually have a link to it in the Appendix 2 section as well. But if you have a clinical science, information science, or laboratory sciences, please use these, because there's been a lot of work I know that was done by School of Medicine to put these together, and they have some great templated resources for those positions to get you started on the right way.
Great. And a little piggyback question off to that, Lindsey, is people were just wondering where they could find the comp matrix that you just worked through as well. And it's on the exact same page that you were just on, where you showed the professional library. If you just scroll down on that left-hand side, it's one of the direct links as well.
Yes. And this document lives in a couple of places. And so if you actually go back out onto the HR business partner pages, it's actually lives here in compensation because they own that document. So compensation, they have it down here as well. So we have a couple of places where we have that FY 2023 document. Good questions.
So question from Jean about competencies. So
Okay.
do you want to see the exact bullets you have in the template plus additional specific to the position listed? Or can they create all of them specific to their position as long as they incorporate the standard bullet content?
Yes, they can create it based off of the position that they have. Those ones are examples that they have in there, and we can clear those out if that's not helpful.
Perfect. And then another great question about the appendix. We will definitely look, I'm sorry, the participant guide. We will definitely double check that to make sure the appendices are showing up. And if not, we'll make sure that an updated version is getting back. So I'll make a note of that as well.
Oh, I wonder if I sent I will check on that because I did get that all together. So apologies on that part. I will definitely check the one that was out there and make sure, and I'll put it back in the chat because there's lots of great resources in there.
Yeah.
And it looks like Majid asked if the salary range Excel is being updated for 2023. Yes, it is. It is actually going to be updated around the beginning of June, and that's when that will be rolled out from the compensation team. I know that group has been doing a lot of hard work and looking at a lot of market data, and so it is coming soon, Majid. Stay tuned.
Any other questions?
Okay, I think back to the presentation. Okay, so reminders, summary reminders. So for university staff, classification structure helps with our equal pay for equal work compliance. More accurate combinations ensures that the positions are accurately compared and that the salary ranges are aligned with our industry data, which is so important for right now. Within our university staff classification structure, positions are classified by your job family, which is the broadest. It's going to go to your sub-function and then to the level is how it works. And then your unique compensation code is going to be your job family, sub-function, and your job code in there. So those 8 characters are made up of those different components. And then HR business partners should be recommending a unique compensation code and submitting that with a search or promotion. And if you run into any questions on that, your TAC consultant is a great resource. And so there are additional questions that we have not addressed before we go into another break, and then we have another section coming up.
Yeah, Lindsay, I just wanted to mention in the second section, hang in, that's going to be where we walk through writing the effective job descriptions and then how that translates to a job ad. So we'll have a break and then that section is coming up.
And I will be checking the participation guide to make sure that we have the right version in there because there was a lot of time put into that one too. Okay, I think, let's see here. It looks like very informative, excited for the information. All right, no, this is good. I'm glad this is helpful. So with that note, we'll go ahead and we'll pause for a break. We'll have 5 minutes. Let's see here. Time-wise, we are at 2:05, so we'll be back at 2:10. And stay tuned because LB's right. We've got writing effective job descriptions, which is so important. So we'll be back after that. Okay, well, welcome back from the break, and I'll have Elby take this next section.
Yeah, so welcome back. Now that we have hopefully a bit of a better understanding of the components that make up a classification, so those 2 to 3 elements that are going to make up that piece of the pie that rounds out your classification, we wanted to take the next part of our presentation and really focus on one, covering the end goal in a little bit more detail, in particular when it comes to employment group. It's a question we just get so frequently, and so we want to make sure to put it in as many trainings as we can, so that conversation surrounding whether your position is university staff or state classified. And then we'll round out the end of the presentation doing a much deeper dive into the job description and the job advertisement, and not only for focusing on like the purpose or the structure of those documents, but really the power of effective descriptions and job advertisements and how they help us from both a recruiting and retention lens. So if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, Lindsay. All right. So one of the biggest topics of conversation that we have when working through the evaluation process is truly what employment group is my position going to fall in? And because you're speaking with talent acquisition today, that really is going to focus on university staff and state classified. If you happen to send us something for faculty or a temp position, we will definitely make sure to triage you to the appropriate person, because we definitely want to make sure that you're getting the right technical guidance, as every employment group is a little bit different. So when we talk about this part of the evaluation process, employment group evaluation, a little history to this is that we as an institution do still accept state funds and use them to fund positions. So when we think about the process of starting an evaluation, our default position is typically to say, okay, this position is state classified to start. And then through the evaluation process, we specifically look for criteria, this evaluation criteria, that would allow us to potentially exempt your position from the state classified system and move it over to university staff. And in terms of this exemption criteria, I know that the slides, in particular this one and the next few coming up, might be a little bit hard to read. Even in the participant guide, it might be a little difficult to read. So I wanted to mention that this information is available on the HR website. If you go to that comp matrix that Lindsay had worked through, there's actually a tab where all of this information is also present. So you don't necessarily have to come back to this participant guide every time you want to learn more about the exemption reasons available to you. Right. So as I mentioned, as part of our evaluation process, we as talent acquisition are really working through these exemption criteria to determine where your position falls within the university structure. Is it state classified or is it university staff? And given the audience we're speaking to today, the majority of your positions are typically exempted from the state classified system based on the fact that they perform professional work. So I know, again, this slide is a little difficult to read, and I actually have a much better visual coming up that outlines this criteria in a much clearer visual. But I wanted to present this slide because we wanted to let everyone know really where this definition of professional work comes from, and it comes from the state of Colorado. We as an institution use their exemption criteria in order to determine whether or not your position aligns with their definition of professional work. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, Lindsay, this slide, I hope, provides a much clearer visual of the paragraph that was featured on the last slide. And this really breaks professional work down into 4 key components. And we as job evaluators are really looking for a position that clearly and consistently touches on all 4 of these bullet points in order to confirm that there is professional work being performed. And the way that I typically like to cover this content is working from the bookends inward, because I think that really kind of helps delineate between when a position is professional in nature versus paraprofessional in nature. So kind of starting on the outside and looking in, the 2 we have on the bookends are going to be critical thinking and discretion and independent judgment. And although I really want to see those in a professional position and they need to be present, those 2 items alone don't necessarily mean that a position is professional in nature. You might think about other support positions you have in your department, like administrative assistants, for example, who get to express a level of critical thinking as well as some discretion and independent judgment in their work. And so those 2 alone don't necessarily mean that your position is going to be professional. Now, as we work our way in, I think this is really where we start to see a clear division between the work that's being performed by professional versus paraprofessional. In the professional series, we would be looking for work that is analytical, evaluative, and interpretive in nature, and also work that requires you to apply knowledge, either obtained from a post-secondary education or specialized experience. This is why you'll notice that when we move to the professional series, positions as a baseline start with a requirement of a bachelor's degree. It's really what's addressing this applied knowledge need. Okay. So if we're working through the evaluation process and we're saying, you know what, I'm finding one, but not all of them, or I'm finding two and not all of them, we will immediately connect with you to sort of just get a better understanding of your position. Again, you know your positions a lot better than we do. And so it's really helpful to have a back and forth sometimes and just even cover this information in a little bit more detail. If you can just clearly communicate to us how it's meeting this criteria, we may or may not need to just make small changes to your description and then move forward from there with a classification. If we collaboratively get together, we go through this content, we say, you know what, it's not meeting all of this criteria. That doesn't mean the position is not important. We definitely see the work as important. It just means that it doesn't happen to meet the professional criteria and instead would be better suited in our paraprofessional series, where it can align with other positions that are doing the same type of work. And then, of course, prior to making any final determination, we will, of course, meet with you just to make sure that everyone is on the same page about where the position fits within our structure. Any questions about this information before we dive into the other exemption reasons? Very good, let's move on then. So as I mentioned, the majority of you really do recruit university staff, professional level positions, entry through director. So that first exemption reason is by and large what we use most for this population, but that doesn't mean there aren't other options available. So I wanted to go over those in a little bit more detail. So the next exemption option that is available to us is the other exemption reason. And that basically says that our leader positions on campus, our officer level positions, and our executive assistants that support officer level roles can also be exempted from the state classified system. We don't get a ton of questions about that one. So I'm going to kind of move swiftly on to the next one, which is alternative funding. I know, again, because of this population, a lot of you use grant, gift, and auxiliary funds to fund your position. And so if, let's say, we've had that collaborative conversation and we've come to the decision that, hey, we've looked at all of the professional criteria and the position is better suited as paraprofessional, that doesn't automatically mean that your position is state classified. We have the option to also look at the funding source of your position. And if you're not using any state funds, so no 610 or 611 accounts, we can actually exempt your position from state classified based on alternative funding. And I have a really great visual cheat sheet for this as well. So Lindsay, if you wouldn't mind just going to that. I didn't include the other exemption reason only because we just don't get a lot of questions on that. Truly, the questions really come out when we're having a conversation either surrounding the duties test, so looking for professional work or not, and then talking about funding. So I hope that if you're having a collaborative conversation with a supervisor who may be just not familiar with the state classified versus university staff employment groups, or how we come to the end product of what employment group your position falls in, this might just be a nice quick visual that we can walk through them with so that they understand how we got to a final place. So as you can see, if your work is clearly professional in nature, so meeting all 4 of those criteria, regardless of your funding source, your position can be exempted from the state and move to the university staff employment group. If your position is important, but doing more paraprofessional work, this is really where the funding piece of your position does play a bigger priority. As you'll notice, paraprofessional work and state funds, even 1% state funds, would push your position over to state classified. Paraprofessional work, though, paired with alternative funds, does allow us to exempt your position and make it university staff. Are there any questions in the chat about this? I hope this cheat sheet is really helpful. I feel like we haven't had always great visuals in the past, so hopefully this is helpful.
Not having any questions in the chat, and I will give a shout out to Elby. She put this graphic together and it does help illustrate some of these things a little bit more clearly.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, then I'm going to take over monitoring the chat and pass you off to both Geraldine and Casey, who are going to dive into the job description and job ad in more detail.
Thanks, Elvie. Everyone can hear me, right? Because this is my first time, talking on the presentation. Just want to make sure. Okay, cool. This slide shows kind of a brief overview of what we're going to cover on the next few slides in more detail. So again, just wanted to kind of show you what we're going to be talking about when it comes to the job description. So on the next few slides too, something to make note of as well is that I'll be talking more about the job description, and then Geraldine will be talking about the job advertisement. So just to kind of give a little bit of an overview, the job description is like the full description of like the position that you're like trying to post and put out there. But the advertisement is going to be a little bit shorter version of the job description. And again, it kind of just helps keep it like more marketable and easier to read for applicants to like look at. And so this, again, just was a quick reference, but we're going to kind of talk about why each section is super important, and also like what the purpose is. So let's go ahead and kick it off to the next slide. So as you all know, usually our positions start off, or the job description starts off with a nature of work and duties. So from a job evaluation perspective, these are probably the most important pieces. Doesn't mean nothing else is important, but these are the ones that we really look at very closely. And I know LB and Lindsay earlier mentioned about the end goal that we discussed when it comes to trying to classify a role, and these are really critical in that part. So the nature of work, sometimes it's also called the position emphasis, so you might see that used interchangeably, but in this section we are typically looking for a concise summary of a position that highlights some of like the most prominent responsibilities of the role. Also, it's really helpful to see if the role is supervising anybody, or if like who's supervising them. Even if you don't directly supervise, someone, it's still good to have it in there. Again, just helps us see if they do have any supervisory responsibilities. Also, the example of work performed section, which is also referred to as the duties. I see that used occasionally, but these outline the responsibilities and the day-to-day activities of the role in a little bit more detail. So what we really like to see in this section is, because it really helps us evaluate a position, is having about 10 or more bullet points that have been categorized and assigned a percentage of time. So for example, sometimes with like business services roles, you might see a mix of like human resources, finances, maybe like communication kind of duties. So it is really nice to see those broken out in percentages of time. So maybe they do human resources like 50% of the time, and finance is 30, and et cetera. So again, it just kind of helps us get a broader perspective of how often these roles will be, or these duties will be performed. And as mentioned earlier too, this is a very challenging job market right now. So something that we are seeing departments doing a lot of is posting open rank recruitments, which we did talk about earlier as well, which is awesome. And we do want you to keep in mind though that when you are developing these sections in a job description, make sure that you do break out the different like duties per level. So for example, like maybe you have like entry, intermediate, and a senior level, making sure that you do flesh out what the differences are in those duties. So maybe a senior professional might be working a little bit more independently. Maybe they have special projects that they work on, but necessarily like an entry level might not. So again, it just kind of helps to break those out. And then Geraldine will talk about the job ad.
Great. Yeah. So shifting over to sort of the recruitment aspect of the job ad. So the content for the job summary section of the job posting actually comes from the nature of work and the duties in the JD. So for a job advertisement, the purpose is to really attract qualified applicants into the role and get them excited about the opportunity. So we recommend 1 to 2 paragraphs based on the nature of work. And that will really help sell the role to potential applicants. We also recommend taking the number of duties and sort of filtering it down to the most important, let's say 5 to 7, that will show the applicants what they'll be doing in the role if they were hired. And we realize that most of you will have more duties than that. And so we would encourage you to share a copy of the JD piece with the candidates as they go in for the interviews. And if you are doing the open rank postings, it is make sure to indicate what levels are being recruited. That's really important. And the Why Join Us section, that's really an opportunity for the department to showcase what's great about working in their department. Maybe you're conducting some exciting research, or you want to share about the culture of your department. That's a great place to do that. And also for you to share a link to the department's website where the applicant can learn more. And then we already place a pre-written benefits summary statement in the job posting template. So if the role is benefits eligible, we do recommend keeping that statement, since our benefits are another selling point for potential applicants. So for both of these sections, we recommend taking a step back and trying to think about the role from the applicant's perspective. You know, what would the job posting look like to attract qualified individuals? And then I think we'll take it to the next slide.
All right. So next is are the minimum qualifications. So since the minimum qualifications do have a downstream impact on the recruitment process, we as the talent acquisition consultants just want to confirm a few things about the minimum qualifications, like as we are reviewing the position. So we just want to make sure that the minimum qualifications are supporting the classification of the position. And if you're not sure what type of education or level of experience should be required, we do have some technical guidance on that, and we can, help you out through that. Also making sure to include some relevant experience and education requirements, something that we can directly connect back to the responsibilities of the role. And something that I know I've been talking a lot with my HRBPs about recently is like using specific years of experience in your minimum qualification section. So for example, like 4 years of experience with blank, or like 4 to 6 years of experience with blank. Versus, saying something like this position requires extensive, diverse, progressively responsible for, et cetera, et cetera. And again, it just makes it a little bit more quantifiable, easy to understand and assess, because remember that you are using the resume or their cover letter to confirm this information. Also making sure that you are keeping the language very simple and avoiding any kind of multi-part qualifications when possible, because again, it gets kind of muddy. So keeping it very simple and not doing multi-part qualifications really helps your review. And if you are recruiting for an open rank position, also make sure that you are, breaking down the minimum qualification section per level. So for example, like a senior professional is usually a bachelor's degree and like 2 years of experience about, and an entry level would just be like a bachelor's degree. So again, just make sure that you are breaking those down.
Alrighty. And so in the kind of MQ's perspective when it comes to recruitment, so basically in this job market, it is best to cast a wide net. So our minimum qualifications are set for the minimum amount of education and experience needed to qualify. So that's done so hiring managers are able to consider lots of different types of experience, which can expand the scope of what the ideal candidate would look like when it comes to experience. So the minimum qualifications are kind of the first threshold that an applicant needs to meet to be considered for a role. So it's important to note we're not able to interview those who do not meet the minimum quals. And also the search committee will also need to be on the same page when it comes to screening minimum qualifications. That way everyone is reviewing the applications in a consistent manner. We also offer the option to use substitution statements in the min quals. And that really allows us for someone who might not have that bachelor's degree to be able to substitute more experience in lieu of the education. And the search committee needs to be aware of what that substitution can look like when it comes to assessing experience. And then kind of lastly, we often get asked about when changes can be made to a job posting or minimum qualifications. So basically, once a position is posted, it's the search committee or recruiter's responsibility to screen off those requirements. So if there's a change in the recruitment that would impact the level and minimum qualifications, we would have to repost that recruitment. And the reason why is because we are an equal employment opportunity employer. And that means that we need to offer an equal opportunity to anyone who's interested in applying for the role. So by changing the minimum qualifications, it can change the applicant pool and who may or may not have applied. And since we are a federal contractor, we are audited by the Office of Federal Contractor Compliance Programs, also known as OFCCP, and they will review our recruitment data, and we can potentially be fined for offering unfair recruitment processes. So that's another thing just to remember. Compliance is key when it comes to shifting any sort of thing within the job posting. And then I think we can move on to the next slide.
Before we move on, are there any questions about that piece of it when it comes to if we need to repost?
So nothing in the chat, but I will keep an eye out.
Okay. Excellent. We will move on.
All right, so the minimum qualifications are like the must-haves, but now we're going to talk about the preferred qualifications, which are the nice-to-haves. So we do kind of offer some similar advice related to preferred qualifications as the minimums. So something to also keep in mind is that they should still support the classification of the position and connect back to the nature of work and duties, just like the minimum qualifications do. Usually we recommend about 3 to 5 bullet points in the preferred qualifications. There have been times where maybe someone has like 10 listed, but do keep in mind whenever you are screening applicants, you'll have to go through like all 10. And I'm like, do you really want to do that? So, I mean, it's your position, but we recommend doing 3 to 5. It just, again, makes it a little bit more concise and easier to evaluate. And we also do recommend, again, keeping them very clear, avoiding any kind of multi-part qualification when possible.
Okay, and shifting kind of to the recruitment approach when it comes to preferred qualifications. So preferred qualifications are sort of the nice to haves, and more often what the search committee would like to see in the candidates. These are another opportunity to also narrow down the pool of applicants to determine who will be interviewed. So these need to be relevant to the role and tangible items that can be screened in application materials. For instance, your resume or for the cover letter. So in this candidate market, we have recommended that if hiring managers have the ability to train new hires, we can look at those with, let's say, less experience, who may have some great soft skills and could maybe be trained on the technical components of the job. And so think about it as, can this experience be trained? If it can, then you can skill the person up on your own internal processes. So just kind of keeping an open mind as well. I think we can go to the next slide.
All right, and then next are our competencies or knowledge, skills, and abilities section. So competencies, also sometimes referred to as like the KSAs, if you hear us use that phrase a lot. It's a section in the job description where we highlight the knowledge, skills, and ability requirements of the role. And because these items are typically really hard to assess on paper, and we do try to put any kind of KSA that we might find in the minimum or preferred qualifications down to the section. So one of the most common ones that I see is like maybe like great organizational skills, but it's really hard to see that like on someone's resume, if that makes sense. That's kind of that assessment that we are talking about. So something that you could have in this section, or that we're looking for, just making sure that there aren't technically any experience requirements in this section. If there are any, we will reach out and see if they should be relocated to the minimum or preferred qualification sections. Also, we are looking to see if there are any possible conditions of employment, and that's also a section that you can always put in as well. So that could be something like ability to work on weekends, ability to be on call, and kind of things like that. And also, for the KSAs, we're looking for maybe about 5 to 10 bullet points. Again, if it's a pretty long list, it might be a little overwhelming. So again, sometimes less is more. So about 5 to 10 bullet points is good.
Righty, so kind of the side of the recruitment for KSAs. So this is an opportunity to showcase the competencies that the hiring manager and search committee believe would be helpful to be successful in the role. So these are items that cannot be screened in materials, like Casey said. However, you can screen on competencies in the interview process. So in fact, interview questions should be tailored to address the competencies advertised during the interview process. And it's best to list only about 5 to 7 competencies in the job posting. There are a lot of competencies out there, but keep in mind, we should be filtering down to the most important and the most relevant to the actual job. And so applicants only spend so long looking at the job posting. So the reason why is if we list a bunch of competencies, it could be overwhelming and kind of cause people to choose to not apply for the opportunity. So it's good just to be mindful on how many we're listing. And I think we're good for the next section.
All right, and then this was mentioned earlier in the presentation, so just to kind of cover it again, but the functional attributes section doesn't get a lot of airtime. So this is that section on the job description between the job description and the job advertisement on the template that has all the check boxes. So that's the functional attributes section. Excuse me. So the information collected in this questionnaire directly supports our reporting and compliance related to any kind of essential or critical service designations, ADA or OSHA. So like any kind of physical, mental, or environmental hazardous requirements of a position. And it also highlights some items that need to be conveyed to candidates or employees, such as like the conditions of employment for the role as well.
Okay, and there's also an opportunity for functional attributes to be listed within the job posting. So functional attributes translate into the other requirements section of the job posting. So these can be built into the job ad with maybe a section titled Other Requirements. And these are things like physical requirements, lifting, repetitive bending, or hazards on the job that the employee should be aware of. So in the interview, if you have specific requirements of the role, be sure to share a copy of the job description with all the boxes, and also ask the candidates if they have any concerns about the requirements. So travel and a regular schedule are also items that could be shared in the job posting and talked about during the interview process. And so if you do have specific requirements, we can also look into creating maybe a pre-screening question or multiple questions. And that way you can ensure that the applicants have read the requirements and we can show that they've acknowledged them in the application process. And I think that's it for these slides. Did anybody have any questions?
Yeah, we have a great question in the chat. So where in the job ad do you recommend indicating if the position is on-site, hybrid, or remote, or if it's located at another site? Maybe like Colorado Springs, for example.
So this is actually a great question, and it's actually very timely. We're looking at updating the job posting template to include a section underneath the job summary that will indicate if it's on-site, remote, or hybrid, and if it's hybrid, how many days. So that's something that we'll be rolling out soon. As of right now, I would recommend putting it in the job summary section of the job posting, but that is something that we're looking at. And I actually think it was a suggestion from somebody in this group. And so we are listening and we are taking a look at adding that to our job posting template, because I know that is very much a selling point for a lot of candidates right now and something that we can certainly highlight. Good question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That is it for right now.
All right. So just to wrap everything up, as far as summary reminders for this section is to submit only the complete job description with all the sections filled. I think as we went through all these different sections, this illustrates all the important aspects of what needs to go into a job description and why we look at those certain things. And so having a full job description is actually going to be helpful as you go through the hiring and promotion process, because your employees want to have a full job description to understand what the requirements are and any additional requirements that might be needed when it comes to the functional attributes. Make sure to check out the job description library that I was showing you earlier. And now that you have the appendix, you have the step-by-steps on how to go there. But this is going to be a way for you to start fresh with a new job description where you can get the information in there. And so if you go to that job description library, copy that and paste it into that section, that'll start you off on the right foot with the sections you need to have when you're completing a job description, with the caveat for School of Medicine, research services, clinical, lab, and information. You want to go to that School of Medicine intranet site because it's got what you need to get you started for those. When it comes to paraprofessional positions, we do have the paraprofessional library on there, and I do mention this a little bit more in the appendix. It's only just the template piece. It's not built out like the professional level one. And so you would still need to go to the state site, which we do have links to that in there, to copy the definition out there, but we do follow the same format for the paraprofessional ones if you're working through those. I have the reminder about the School of Medicine templates, which I've already covered. And then the last thing I will mention is that if you have a job description, if you have a new position within your department that maybe you haven't had before and you're just like, I don't know where to start with this position, let your TAC consultant know, because we get to see positions across the whole Anschutz University, and we've even seen the ones on the Denver campus. So we have some pretty good resources and ideas of different things that you could do. And we also would probably have some templates that we'd be able to share to get you started to where you're not necessarily starting from scratch. And so don't feel like you have to necessarily start from scratch. But yes, if you have any other questions, please let us know. And it looks like only Appendix 2. I don't see Appendix 1. I don't understand why it did not copy over right. I will email this out to everyone. I thought it connected over, but apparently it did not share in there nicely. So apologies for that. But I will send it out to all of you with that version of it. But with that, any questions or any feedback? I know one of the things that we are working on right now, and just to point out that we are going to work on that FY 2023 document coming out in early June, so stay tuned for that. And then trying to think if there's any other things that we're looking at. We are also looking at minimum qualifications as far as like years of experience, and so we'll be getting some feedback from those of you in the different departments to make sure that we're aligning. We're just taking a look at those from a market perspective, and we'd love to get feedback on that. So stay tuned for that as well. That is all I have. Are there any questions on here?
Not
I
seeing
haven't
any.
typed my question yet. Can I just ask it?
Yes,
Of course, Jean.
that works out.
So when the new ranges come out in early June, will there be a process? Like, will you guys update current and active postings with those new ranges, or what's going to be the process for postings that are already out there and in progress?
Jean, I love this question, and Flory can probably tell you I was just talking to her about that 2 days ago. I am actually going to try to figure out, we're going to figure out which ones are going to be changing as far as the minimum salary ranges of those, and then going into the system to figure out which open positions we currently have out there right now so we can try to proactively update those. And so we will be helping out with that process for the FY 2024. All right, thumbs up. Okay. Any others? Well, if any other questions do come up, our virtual door is open. You can come talk to us. We can happy to answer questions. Hopefully this is helpful to see how we classify positions and best practices for the job description. We did put a little sneak preview about the recruitment. I know I get to see all of you next month where we'll talk more about the recruitment piece. So we'll dive even further into some of those best practices on those, but we kind of, it's kind of one of those things, it's a great opportunity to tie how the job description plays into that. So we wanted to make sure to illustrate that here. But other than that, thank you. Thank you for having us, and I hope this was helpful.
Thanks so much, Lindsay and Casey and Elby and Geraldine. We really appreciate you coming today. And if anybody has any suggestions for future topics, please shoot those to SOM HR. And I'm going to put in the chat, and I'm going to actually send out an email with the, actually, I'll just send out an email with the evaluation for today. So thanks everybody for coming. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Olivia, Natalie, Paula, Mujib, any last questions before we end the meeting?
Sorry, no, I just started typing. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Natalie, any remaining questions?
I just hung up on her.
Okay, let me stop. Here, stop the recording. Stop the recording.